The town of Crimson Hollow hadn't changed in the 10 years Elias McCrae had been gone. Same dusty streets, same crooked saloon porch, same half-broken windmill creaking at the edge of town like a dying man's breath. He hadn't meant to come back. Not really, but the past had a funny way of pulling a man's reins when he wasn't looking. Elias stepped down from his saddle, his boots hitting the ground with a quiet finality. His horse, an obsidian black stallion named Ash, snorted softly and shook his mane. Ash had been more than a horse. He'd been Elias's shadow, his companion through years of silence and fire. The only thing in the world the gunslinger still trusted. They had barely made it to the old McCrae homestead, a lonely stretch of scorched earth a mile outside town, when Elias noticed the trail dust. 5 riders, maybe 6, moving fast, cutting across his land like they owned it. He narrowed his eyes. Trouble. He could smell it, even after all these years. By the time he stabled Ash and stepped inside the ruined cabin, it was too late. The riders came at dusk. Elias was gathering firewood when the first bullet whistled past his ear and slammed into the oak behind him. He hit the dirt, rolling behind the well and drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. The bastards didn't call him Ironhand for nothing. He returned fire. 1 shot, 2, before everything went quiet. Too quiet. He rose cautiously, scanning the tree line, and that's when he heard it. A scream. Not human. Sharp. Pained. Ash. Elias sprinted, his heart already knowing what his eyes refused to accept. He found Ash lying near the corral, legs twitching, blood pooling beneath him. 1 bullet to the chest, another between the eyes. Clean, efficient, like a message. Elias dropped to his knees, his hand trembling as he reached out and stroked the horse's muzzle. The warmth was fading fast. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered. "You didn't deserve this." The gunfire had been a distraction. They hadn't come for Elias, not directly. They came to take what tethered him to the earth, the last living piece of his soul, and they had succeeded. By dawn, Ash was buried behind the cabin under a crude stone marker Elias carved himself. He didn't cry. The tears had dried up years ago, back when his wife and child were taken in a fire he hadn't started. But he felt something colder, something worse, purpose. Elias rode into town by foot, wearing his long coat and iron eyes. He walked into the sheriff's office and placed a single bullet on the desk. "This belong to any of your men?" he asked flatly. Sheriff Branley eyed the bullet, then the man. He looked older than Elias remembered, softer. "No, Elias, I'd remember issuing that kind of message." "Then maybe you remember who would." Branley sighed, removed his hat, and looked down at the floor. "There's a gang. Calls themselves the Hollow Vultures. Came in 6 months ago. Started bleeding the town slow. Took over the saloon, the stables, everything but the church. Don't think they feared God, just didn't see any money in it." Elias pocketed the bullet. "Where's their nest?" Branley hesitated. "You sure you want to—" "I'm not asking permission." Silence. Finally, Branley pointed east. "Abandoned silver mine. Half a day's ride. They don't expect folks to go looking." Elias turned to leave. "They'll kill you," the sheriff added quietly. Elias paused in the doorway. "They already did." And with that, Ironhand McCrae stepped into the light. The town watched as he passed, mothers clutching their children, drunks sobering up in his shadow. They knew the stories. Of a man who once took down 7 bounty hunters in the space of a heartbeat. Of the legend who walked away from blood and never looked back. Until now. This time the legend was walking toward it. And the vultures had no idea the storm they just unleashed. The wind howled low through the canyon, whispering through sun-bleached bones of the abandoned silver mine. High above, a buzzard circled slow and lazy, like it already smelled death in the dirt. Elias McCrae crouched behind a crag of stone, watching the mine's entrance. 2 guards, young, cocky, rifles slung over their shoulders like fashion statements, stood at the mouth of the hollow. One smoked, the other swatted at flies. Neither had the look of men who expected trouble. Definitely not the kind Elias carried. He adjusted the leather strap of the rifle across his back and checked the weight of his revolvers. 2 on the hip, 1 in the coat, 1 knife strapped to his boot. He didn't plan to use all of them, but plans had a way of changing when bullets started flying. His hand hovered over his iron-handled Colt. fingers twitching not from nerves, but muscle memory, the kind carved into bone by years of violence. Ash's death still echoed in his head, the shot between the eyes, the way the stallion collapsed without a cry, and the silence that followed. That silence would be paid for in screams. Elias moved like shadow, one moment behind Rock. The next, he was among them. 2 shots, one for each throat. The guards never saw him coming. They dropped without ceremony, just another part of the dust. He dragged the bodies behind a broken ore cart and pushed deeper into the mine's black mouth. Inside, it smelled of rot and rusted ambition. The hollow vultures had set up shop with makeshift bunkhouses and stolen furniture. Whiskey bottles, bloodstains, and old Union flags covered in graffiti littered the walls. The place looked like it had once known purpose. Now it knew only decay and men. 8 of them by Elias's count. Lounging, drinking, playing cards. None armed with more than arrogance. But that changed quick. He stepped into the lantern light. "McCrae?" One of them gasped, dropping his cards. Elias said nothing. He drew. The room exploded into motion. 3 men reached for guns. Too slow. Elias shot the table in half, then dropped the first with a shot through the collarbone. The second tried to run. A bullet found his spine. The third fired wild, missing by feet. Elias didn't miss. No, when the smoke cleared, 5 lay bleeding. 2 more came running from deeper in the mine, only to find Elias crouched behind the stove, revolver already raised. "Wait, we didn't—" They didn't finish the sentence. Elias didn't shoot men who tried to justify murder. The last man standing wasn't much older than a boy, trembling, wide-eyed, with a patchy beard and a blood-slick knife. He backed into the wall as Elias approached. "You were there," Elias said calmly, "at the ranch. I just held the reins. I didn't shoot the horse. That was Kane. He said it'd make a point. Please." "Kane?" "Kane Maddox. He's the boss. He runs the vultures. He's the one who gave the order." "Where is he?" The boy pointed south. "Old ranch near Devil's Backbone. Keeps the best horses there. Claims it's his collection. He's got your saddle. Hung it on the gate like a trophy." That was all Elias needed to hear. He turned. The boy started sobbing in relief. Then Elias stopped. He glanced over his shoulder. "One last thing." The boy froze. Yeah. You held the reins?" The shot echoed like thunder through the hollow mine. Outside, the buzzard circled lower. The road to Devil's Backbone was cut from the bones of the land itself. Dry ravines, shattered rocks, and gullies deep enough to bury secrets that would never surface. Elias rode a borrowed chestnut mare, lean and mean, the kind of horse used to long rides and harder men, the kind that wouldn't run from gunfire. Dust clung to Elias's coat like old sin, his eyes narrowed against the burning wind. Each mile brought the distant shape of the ranch into clearer view. An old hacienda-style structure atop a flat bluff, with split-rail fencing, black smoke curling from its chimney, and a longhorn skull nailed above the barn. But it wasn't the skull that made his blood boil. It was the saddle. Ash's saddle, burnished leather, silver studs, a custom horn engraved with the brand EM, hung on the ranch gate like a hunter's prize. Elias's jaw clenched so hard it made his teeth ache. He didn't slow the horse. As he approached, 2 men came out onto the porch with rifles. One spit a wad of tobacco into the dust. "Well, I'll be damned," the taller one said. "The ghost rides." The second man raised his rifle. "Maddox said if he showed, we put him in the dirt." Elias didn't speak. He shot the first man through the throat, the second through the eye, and rode straight through the gate without breaking stride. He didn't want stealth now. He wanted them to know he was coming. He wanted Kane Maddox to hear the hoofbeats and know death was on its way. Gunfire erupted from the barn. A rider burst out, trying to make a break for it. Elias swung his rifle off his back and fired once. The horse went down, tumbling. The rider flew face first into a rock and didn't move again. More men spilled out of the house, shouting, ducking behind barrels and wagons. Elias dismounted and moved like water. A shot clipped his shoulder. He barely flinched. He returned fire with surgical precision. A kneecap exploded. A man screamed behind a wagon. Another tried to flank him. Elias turned and fired without looking. The man dropped, his pistol clattering to the dirt. By the time the dust settled, 6 men bled out across the yard. But Kane Maddox hadn't shown his face. Not yet. From the second-story balcony, a voice rang out. "Well now, that's quite the entrance, Ironhand." Kane Maddox stood in a tailored black coat, a gold pocket watch in one hand, a Henry repeater in the other. His salt and pepper beard was trimmed short, his eyes sharp and calculating. Elias said nothing. Kane chuckled. "You know, I almost didn't believe it when they said you were still alive. I figured Ash had to go first. That horse was your soul. Kill the horse, kill the man. That's what I thought." "You thought wrong," Elias said. Kane raised the rifle. "And now you're alone. Again. What's left of you now?" Elias dropped into a crouch just as the rifle cracked. The shot missed. Elias returned fire. His bullet struck the balcony post, splintering it near Kane's hand. The outlaw staggered back, swearing. Elias moved fast, reloading as he ran, heading toward the back stairs. Kane Maddox was clever, but he wasn't a killer the way Elias was. He was a coward who gave orders and let others die for them. No more. Elias kicked open the back door and swept through the hallway like a ghost with a grudge. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the rifle heavy in his hands, his revolvers ready. Kane had retreated into his office. Elias could hear him shuffling papers, moving something heavy, maybe blocking the door. Didn't matter. Elias kicked it in. The door cracked open, swinging wide. Kane spun around with a sawed-off shotgun, but Elias was already shooting. The slug ripped through Kane's shoulder, sending him spinning. The shotgun fired into the wall, blasting plaster and wood. Kane collapsed, coughing blood, his back to the fireplace. You don't have to do this," he gasped. "You got your revenge." Elias stepped over the rifle Kane had dropped. "No," he said coldly. "This is justice." He raised his gun. Kane looked up, terrified. "It was just a damn horse." Elias's voice was calm, final. "He was better than you ever were." The shot echoed across the bluff like thunder rolling in from a new storm. Kane Maddox's blood still clung to Elias's hands, drying in dark streaks across the cuff of his shirt, like the past refusing to wash away. The morning wind had fallen silent, as if the prairie itself held its breath, mourning or marveling at what had been unleashed. Elias pulled Ash's old saddle from the barn wall, his fingers ghosting over the worn leather. The weight of it, once familiar, now felt like a vow made in blood. Vengeance had a shape now, but Kane hadn't worked alone. Behind him stood a darker name, Silas McCrae, a man more shadow than flesh, mean-eyed, deep-voiced, and hollowed out by cruelty. A grave digger who didn't wait for people to die. Elias remembered him well. Years back, on the edge of a border town called Brimstone, Silas had dragged a farmer's boy behind his horse for stealing jerky. The kid had been 12. Silas never blinked. Rumor had it he was riding with a gang again. The hollow spurs, cutthroats, bounty jumpers, and deserters all stitched together by greed. If Kane was the hammer, Silas was the fire that burned the rest. Elias had work to do. He headed south toward Dry River Gorge, where Kane's trail led. His mare, Tempest, moved like smoke over the hills, hooves silent against the earth. Every mile brought him closer to the storm. At dusk he reached a burned-out homestead, a place that had once held laughter. Now it held only ashes and flies. Bullet holes riddled the doorframe. Elias dismounted, eyes scanning the dirt for the dance of hooves and boots. There it was, a pattern in the dust, one horse heavier than the others, limping slightly. A draft breed. Kane's old gelding, but more than that, a different set of prints, wider stance, steel-capped. Silas was here. The sun bled out across the horizon as Elias followed the tracks deeper into the gorge, where the air grew heavy in the rocks swallowed sound. The silence broke only when he heard it. A low whistle, 2 notes, then a third, a signal. They were waiting. Elias didn't flinch. He walked into the clearing like a man who'd already died once. 3 riders emerged from behind the rocks, one young, twitchy, with a pistol half drawn, one older, calm-eyed, cradling a Winchester like it was gospel. And then Silas. Same cracked boots, same dead stare. Well, I'll be, Silas rasped, spitting a streak of tobacco. Didn't think you'd come all this way over a damn horse. Elias said nothing. Silas grinned. Heard what you did to Cain. Damn shame. He owed me money. Still nothing. The youngest outlaw shifted, fingers fidgeting. You're him, ain't you? The tracker from Iron Ridge. The bounty killer who went soft. Elias's voice was low, cold. You touched Ash. Silas raised a brow. That was Cain's doing. You stood there. You know how the world works, McCrae. Yeah, Elias replied, sliding his coat back to reveal the iron on his hip. And I'm here to change it. The kid went for his gun. Elias moved faster. The colt barked once, then twice. The boy dropped, shot clean through the chest. The older man barely got his Winchester up before Elias's second shot tore through his throat. Silas didn't move. Not yet. You always were quick, he muttered. Elias stepped forward. And you always were slow to understand consequence. The wind picked up. Silas drew. Too late. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spun him half around. He staggered but didn't fall, just laughed, blood staining his shirt like a spilled lie. You think this ends with me? He hissed. Elias holstered his weapon. Number. But it starts with you. He walked over, grabbed Silas by the collar, and dragged him toward the edge of the gorge. The man kicked and cursed, but Elias didn't flinch. He threw him hard against a boulder, pinned him there. You kill a man's horse, Elias said, voice tight with fury. You kill the last piece of peace he had left. Silas spat blood. He was just a dumb animal. Elias leaned in close. No, he whispered. He was family. And then he dropped Silas. Not a bullet, not a knife. Just the canyon swallowing him whole. As the echoes faded, Elias stood alone in the dying light, wind whispering through the rocks like ghosts telling stories no one asked to hear. And he kept riding, because peace was still miles away, and the hollow spurs weren't done yet. The night bled into morning with no ceremony. The prairie, still damp with frost, lay quiet under the pale breath of dawn. Elias McCrae stood beneath a twisted juniper, sharpening his blade by firelight, the soft scrape of steel on stone, the only sound for miles. The silence wasn't peace. It was tension coiled tight around his ribs. Silas Cray was dead. But Elias hadn't started this war with a name. He'd started it with a memory. Ash, the stallion he'd raised from a colt, was more than a horse. That animal had been his only constant through years of gunfights and grave mistakes. They'd crossed badlands together, outrun bounty hunters, and slept under the stars when no roof would take them. Ash had been the one thing Elias never failed to protect until now. Now Elias was a storm wrapped in human skin. The hollow spurs wouldn't rest easy, not after what he did to Silas, not with whispers of the Ironhand devil following their every move. Word traveled fast out west, and it always twisted on the wind. At a saloon in Buckshot Hollow, the bartender spilled whiskey on his boots when Elias walked in. Conversations died mid-word. A woman holding cards dropped her hand, and no one looked him in the eye. Not even the piano player dared to tap a key. Elias stepped to the bar, placed a single bullet on the counter. I need names. The barkeep swallowed hard. Ain't looking for trouble, mister. Good, Elias said, sliding the bullet forward like it was gold. Neither am I. I'm looking for your mouth to work. The barkeep's hand trembled as he wiped sweat from his brow. 3 days ago, 5 men riding hard, spurs like firelight. One had a snake tattoo down his neck. Said they was heading to the gallows teeth, bad canyon country near Crow's End. Elias nodded once. That was enough. He left without another word. The trail to gallows teeth was dust and bones, a place where even coyotes refused to howl. By noon, Elias spotted signs, boot prints, cigar ash, a brass button caught in a thorn bush. The hollow spurs were close, too close. That night they made their mistake. They came for him, 5 of them, sneaking through brush, whispering plans like boys daring each other to touch a ghost. But Elias was no ghost. He was the thing ghosts feared. The first man never even saw the knife. The second one took a bullet in the dark, falling against a tree with a grunt and a prayer half-formed. The others scrambled, firing blind, panicked. Elias dropped from the ridge, silent as a shadow, and ended it with steel and fire. When it was done, Only one remained. Young, shaking, a patchy beard and tear-filled eyes. Elias stepped over bodies, eyes locked on the kid. Name, the boy stammered. What? Who leads what's left of you? The kid swallowed. Mason Greer. He's in Dead Lantern Ridge. He ain't like the rest. He's worse. Elias leaned in, the firelight dancing in his cold eyes. Tell him I'm coming. By sunrise, Elias was gone, but in his wake the wind whispered. Names, Ash, Silas, Cray, McCrae, and now, Mason Greer. The hollow spurs were running out of places to hide, and Elias Ironhand. McCrae wasn't done yet. The storm rolled in just before sunset, black clouds stretching wide across the Dakotan sky, swallowing the horizon. Wind howled down from the ridges, kicking dust into whirling devils that danced along the canyon's edge. In the heart of Dead Lantern Ridge, the last of the hollow spurs hunkered down, uneasy in their fortress of crumbling stone and rotted timbers. Mason Greer watched the sky with narrowed eyes. He wasn't a man easily shaken. He'd led massacres, burned towns, and made widows from the Missouri to the Colorado line. But something in that wind unnerved him. It felt like the prairie itself was holding its breath. And Mason Greer knew what men said about Elias McCrae. Not a man, they said. A force. A curse wrapped in gunpowder and scar tissue. They called him the Ironhand Devil, because no one could stop him once the killing started. Greer turned to his men, what few he had left. He comes tonight. Ready yourselves. Elias rode into Dead Lantern Ridge as lightning cracked across the sky, his coat soaked, hat low, revolver slung loose at his hip. No stealth this time, no surprise. This was war, and Elias wanted them to see it coming. He tied his new horse, barely broken, black as midnight, at the edge of the ridge, gave the beast a firm pat on the neck. You ain't Ash, he murmured, but you're mine now. Stay if you want to see another dawn. Then he walked into hell. They saw him silhouetted in the lightning flash. One man, soaked in rain, carved from vengeance. 5 rifles fired from the ledge. Elias dropped low, rolled behind a rusted mining cart, and answered with fire of his own. 2 men fell screaming. The 3rd ran. Mistake. Elias caught him through the spine. Thunder drowned the rest. Inside the main cabin, Mason Greer waited with a shotgun and a sneer. He'd fortified the place like a war bunker. Shutters nailed, lanterns out, kill zones mapped. But Elias didn't come through the door. He came through the wall. One boot shattered the rotting timber. Elias barreled through like a demon loosed from some ancient tomb, bloodied knife in one hand, 6-shooter in the other. Mason fired once, missed. Elias didn't. The bullet caught Greer's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He screamed, dropped the shotgun. They clashed in the firelight. Fists, knives, fury, no words, just pain. Mason drove a knee into Elias's gut, sent him sprawling. You think you're better than me? He roared. You're just like us, just a killer with a story to justify the bodies. Elias, blood dripping from his lip, rose slow. Number, I'm worse. And then he moved. Fast. The knife flashed. The gun roared. Mason dropped to his knees, a hole in his gut and steel in his throat. His last words were a whisper lost to the wind. Elias didn't wait to hear them. He walked out into the rain. By dawn, Dead Lantern Ridge was silent. Crows circled above, but they would find no fear here, only reckoning. Elias stood at the ridge, the wind tugging at his coat. He had no home to go back to, no one waiting. But vengeance. Vengeance was done. He reached into his coat, pulling out a thin leather strap, Ash's bridle, worn and frayed. He tied it to a stone, set it on the cliff's edge, and whispered something only the wind could carry. Then he mounted his horse and turned west, riding not toward a destination, but away from everything that had turned him into a weapon. The legend of Elias Ironhand McCrae would stretch far across the frontier, stories told in saloons and whispered by firesides. Some said he was a ghost. Some said he was the last honest man in a land that forgot what that meant. But all agreed on one thing. You don't kill a man's horse unless you're ready to face the devil he becomes. And so, across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, because out here there are still so many truths left to tell, each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.